Ladies and gentlemen, guys and girls, welcome to the Age of Warfare podcast. I am Satorian Actionist Maximus. That is the gate Aiden Cordier. And today's topic is going to be a controversial but interesting topic. And trust me, there's going to be plenty of history behind this topic. And we're going to be talking about why is Latin America feeling so bad? Why has Latin America fallen behind so badly? As a Latin American myself, it's kind of a tough topic to talk about, but it's also kind of one we kind of need to talk about. It kind of needs to be pointed out. But as I was doing my research, and I hope Aiden, you did some research yourself, there's some interesting reasons why Latin America is failing, and it's not black and white like you think it is, like you might think. So, as before we get started, as always, Aiden, how are you doing today, my brother?
I'm doing good. I'm doing good. I've been playing games today. My mate left about 5 minutes ago. Hence all of the gaming stuff behind me. Games yesterday, I resoundingly lost both games because you've got to keep on form. But apart from that, my last weekend where I did my airsoft event went really well. There are a few hiccups as there always are. But it's been lovely weather all week as well. So it's been that go outside and it's happy to walk around. It's not giant puddles everywhere, which it usually is this time of year. So
Okay, yeah, it sounds like a lot of fun. And yeah, in case you want to know why we didn't come on last week, that was because Aiden was out having a big game. They showed me pictures of everything. It was like a big a whole lot of fun. So yeah, let's get into today's topic. For those who might not be Latin America or even those who know, Latin America is kind of falling behind in the times, and it's compared to Europe, the UK, United States. Latin America's been falling. For those who don't know, Latin America is you're talking about South America, like Argentina, Chile, the Caribbean, like Puerto Rico, Dominican Republic, Cuba, and then Central America, like Mexico, El Salvador, Nicaragua, Honduras, all those particular countries. It's no secret that we've been falling behind as a people, but it's some very interesting reasons why that's the case. And as I was telling you in the beginning, it's not so black and white. It actually kind of predates all the way to Roman times. Yeah, the Romans actually do get into this puzzle some way somehow. So, Aiden, I want to start off. Do you, before I come up with my theories, do you have a particular theory yourself why this is the case?
it's to me, it's one of the big impacts is the fact that Latin America wasn't that involved in World War II. Sounds a very bizarre
Oh,
notion, but if you look at the major belligerents in World War II, after the war, the rebuilding efforts, countries put a lot of effort into rebuilding that, and that was obviously the time when the
mhm.
European empires were being dismantled. But by that time, Latin America had already been dismantled imperially. It was already its own countries as well, so it didn't have that. Right, cool. Well, we need to do all of this to change everything and give it a push. They sort of missed out on that sort of
Mhm.
big 40s to 50s, late 40s obviously to 50s into the 60s of countries doing this massive rebuilding and pushing forward, and their connections, because of some of their connections to the regimes that lost as well, they were seen as sort of like, we'll help them if we've got spare. But obviously, all of the money into rebuilding was going into the people that won. They weren't on the winning side, and they were kind of aligned with the losing side as well, even while they were neutral, which meant that they kind of got left behind in that sort of big modern push. You think of, say, the US and
Right.
the end of World War II. World War II is what put the US on the map. Their
Yes.
industrial capacity would not be what it is. If they were not involved in World War II, the US would be a backwater. It was industrializing, it was getting good. It had obviously the stock market collapsed, it all went down, but it was doing fairly well. But all of the imperial money, so the UK's money, we finished paying the US off. My taxes went to pay that off. It was 2008, I think, were the last payments, and some of them were from the First World War as well. a lot of the imperial money went over to the US, and that helped them rebuild. But because we were so closely allied, that had a knock-on effect through Europe, which sort of dragged everyone upwards. And the Soviet Union was off doing its own thing as well. And then obviously it's had its collapse, and now all the problems you have in Russia as well, where they've dropped below as well. But that's because the core countries that are doing that push forward. Look at India's got a space program. India's doing really well at the moment. They've got a lot of societal issues they're dealing with, but actually they're becoming big on the world stage. Oddly enough, there is one Latin American country that is sort of India level, Brazil. Brazil's doing I think that's a factor of population more than anything else.
Oh no, yeah.
They've got resources, and then they've got the people to use those resources and then to push things forward. But they're still not quite at that Brazil level. They're more sort of Nigeria, where they've got the population resources and they're up and coming, but there are other societal issues and surrounding countries having issues. It's difficult for them as a group to actually push forward. I think a lot of it comes from them being left behind in that period.
I'm gonna tell you something right now, Aiden. That's actually a very interesting deal you came up there. That's actually one that kind of passed me by when I was researching this topic. Because even though we don't want war, but war does make money. In fact, I've been binging Civilization 3. I've been playing that quite a bit lately, and definitely taking over other factions, taking over overseas does bring up your economy. There's some truth to that. But what if I told you, Aiden, that Latin America as a whole is actually very conducive? Latin America should be doing way better than North America because geographically, and there's a whole lot of resources. Instead, they got gold, coal, cobalt. They got all kinds of resources down in Latin America. So you think they should be really kicking the shit out of not just me, but even you guys up in the UK.
100%, yeah. It's
here's where my theory comes into play, and it has to do with ancient Rome. And I say the reason ancient Rome because you know what ancient Rome did when they conquered? They exploited. All right, keep that in the back of your head. They exploited. They exploited the enemy. When they took over Carthage, they exploited Carthage. They took the slaves. They never really built up Carthage. They just exploited it and took all the goods back to Rome. Now, and here's where this comes into play, because you know what they call it in Latin America? Spain. And who used to rule Spain before it became Spain? The Romans. So basically, this theory basically says the Romans took over Spain or Hispania, which is what the land of Iberia, the Iberian Peninsula. So because the Romans were the kind of people who exploited the goods. So basically, the Spanish they took what they learned from being Roman. Before the Vandals came in and took over them, not the Vandals, but the Goths. But despite that,
the Vandals, then the Goths. But you've also got to remember obviously Spain was taken because that was Carthaginian territory, which was the Second Punic. That's what the Second Punic War was about, really, wasn't it? It was especially eastern Spain, which was New Carthage, is eastern Spain.
Yeah, Carthago Nova. Yes, Carthago Nova. Yep. But here's where it gets interesting, because the Romans were the kind of people to exploit. The Spain never really got out of that mindset. They decided to even though they were no longer Roman or even Byzantine, they were their own people. But they took the ancient Roman way of exploiting and used it for themselves. So they became the Spanish version of the Roman Empire. The only thing they speak Spanish, not Latin. So what happened was when they went to Latin America, they in the colonial era with Christopher Columbus and all that, they took over. I can give you a good example. Puerto Rico. They came to Puerto Rico and they exported the Taino Indians. Instead of building with the Indians, they exploited the Indians. They just took all the gold, all the resources, and sent it back to the old world instead of building up the new world.
it's one of those interesting things when you look at, say, North America in the same
Yeah.
time period. Obviously, like
Right.
it includes Canada and
Yes.
everything down into not Texas, because that was what Mexican territory really at that
Mhm.
point. But all of those colonies were, because of the diseases that had come across and all of that had hit the earlier era that had come up through Central America that had destroyed all of the nations that were there. So the people that were already there were sparse, which is where this colonial mindset then came in of, well, the land isn't being used. They weren't the people to use the land. They died. The cities had disappeared. So it was free country. So it meant that people moved in and treated it like, yes, we're exploiting resources, but we're exploiting resources to build this area up because it's essentially virgin land as far as they were concerned, because they didn't care about how the Native American tribes in the area really thought about it, because they were predominantly the nomadic ones were the ones that survived. Because you had Florida, they had that's where the Native Americans, I can't remember the name of the tribe now, but they had proper cities and stuff. They actually had a flourishing empire. It was kind of like the Mesoamerican empires, and it was starting to build up. But when you get disease, if you've got a city, you're going to be hit harder on a disease. So like you look at the Black Death in Europe, it's like the areas that were sparsely populated, not hit as hard. The areas that were densely populated, absolutely destroyed by the Black Death. Same thing happened, obviously, in what was the New World at the time. Whereas Latin America it had that early stuff, and then it had that load later on as well with Simón Bolívar, where all the stuff Simón Bolívar did. Obviously, we have Bolivia now, which is essentially the central part of that. But that whole interesting movement that was into the 1800s, which led to the revolutions, the 1800s revolutions in Italy, and the formation of Italy came out of a lot of that. So, as you say, with the Roman Empire, it's that Italy-Spain thing, that you've got this Latin American connection that then comes back over because they're still using those same things. And then if you look at how Columbus got his funding, that was the thing that broke the Catholic Church in the end, was indulgences, because everyone was like, so the rich people pay money and then don't go to hell. Well, this is bullshit.
Yeah, right.
That was a idea of what's her name, Queen, Spanish Queen, and yes, she pushed all of that to gain the funding to send Columbus off to do all of that, because she knew it's an investment possibility. You do that, you get the money, you send him off, and he comes back with all the gold. Spanish treasure ships, very well known thing. We know about Spanish treasure ships up here in our northern Europe, because we didn't go and get the gold. We went to the Spanish to get it, and we nicked it all. That's how we generally worked on that principle.
But now, But now here's the big difference between England and Spain, because don't forget, England founded they went to America, the 13th, when they went to America. Now here's the biggest difference: while Spain exploited the natives, England had to do the opposite. England couldn't exploit the natives there; they had to work with the natives.
Because there really weren't that many left to exploit, basically. Yeah.
But they had to work. But the idea is they had to work with them, which actually turned out to be a really good move, which actually turned out to really help the United States out. And that's why they founded democracy, in the United States, because they, instead of fighting with the natives, they worked with the natives, and, they were able to come together. And that's why you have democracy in the United States. Now in Latin America, it didn't really going so well, because in Latin America, it was all monarchy, monarchs or despotism. It was basically Spain will rule with an iron fist, as they say. And if you play Civilization, Nathan, especially Civilization 3, you tend to be rewarded more in cash when you play as a republic or a democracy. And you tend to have more penalties when your government is a fascist despotism or even monarchy, or communism. You tend to have more penalties against how much money you can actually make, how much conquest you can make. So and it's funny because Sid Meier, the guy who makes it, he did a wonderful job fitting in the game mechanics to match what the actual government types are and what the actual consequences turn out to be for, because non-Latin American countries back then were ruled by iron fist, and even though Spain had control, but they never really got as much Congress that those countries never really got to boom. They were kind of held back because of the way the government is now. Because now, if you look at Venezuela today, is a dictatorship in Venezuela.
Yeah, and it's very swingy as well. It's either they have a right wing one or they have a left wing one, and it's like, was it Bolsonaro? Is that Venezuela, Bolsonaro, or is that Chile?
No. What Venezuela is Maduro, right now.
Yeah. So it's very swingy, and it's if you look at US politics, obviously you've got that really strong divide in US politics. You're either on the left or you're the right, and it's something that the US is struggling to deal with at the moment. But it's even more pronounced to say when you get into Latin American countries that you have this.
Yes.
And when they get in, you try and deal with corruption, but there's only so much you can deal with. And when you've got a country that's incredibly corrupt, you have to work with the people who are corrupt to be able to do anything, and you have to slowly get rid of it. You can't go in and go, I'm going to deal with the corruption and I get rid of all these people, because then the entire economy collapses. It's like some of the areas of Mexico that are ruled by the drug cartels, and the people there they don't like the drug cartels because of who they are. However, they would prefer the drug cartels because they actually look out for their family. It's like the whole gang situation.
Yes.
So you lived in New York. That's in the time period where gangs were famous. There's people join gangs because you've got your protection, so your stuff isn't going to get destroyed, taken over. You can walk down the street and people aren't going to attack you because they know that you're either a member of or linked to said gang, so that you can carry on your life. You're not joining them because you want to do what they're doing. You're joining them because you don't have any other choice in the matter.
Yes.
You need to be able to live your life, and the only way to do it is to do that. So if you dismantle that sort of infrastructure and societal structure, you've got to fill it with something. And it's one of the big post-colonial things as well. Is one of the things that the British Empire did very well in certain places and very badly in other places. India is a classic example of this. There are certain bits of big swathes of India that we did very well on this. They came up, we left them. It's the classic. We left them railroads and democracy. Things like, yes, we did. They'd have done that themselves at a certain point, but those areas sort of came up. We had, I think it was like 2,000 people by the time we left. And you think how many people are in India? We were ruling it with 2,000 people. The majority of people in charge were Indians. So once we left, we sort of let them carry on. There's a couple of African places. Ghana, for example, is another one where we sort of slowly left, and it's sort of stable. It's about as stable as a lot of those African countries can get. But then if you look into the northwest of India, we always have problems with northwest of India. Everyone had problems with that area because that goes off, that area includes Afghanistan. And as we've talked about before, death of empire area. But it was the movement of the Muslims from the Hindu areas and the Hindus from the Muslim areas. And we just basically gave up and went, right, cool, we're fed up of you two fighting. We're just going to draw a line. All Muslims go over there, all Hindus go over there. They don't give a crap what you're doing. We did that really badly. And to this day, there is still conflicts across the border. Kashmir. It's like people don't talk about Kashmir anymore, but realistically, Kashmir is the Indian Northern Ireland, really, when you think about it. It's going to be resolved at some point, and it's going to be incredibly bloody when it's resolved. We all hope it isn't, but it can be. You go to the other side, you've got sort of Bengal, you've got the Bengal famine and stuff. I'm not going to go into that because there's so much propaganda on both sides that no one will ever agree on that. And the facts of it, there are facts of it, and my views on it are basically, here's the facts. You did it to yourselves, a level of attitude, but they wouldn't have done it if we weren't there being imperial, which is where it gets deeper type of thing. That type of stuff. And then you go to Latin America, it's the same situation you've got, but it's those areas you don't have this big swathe in the middle where it's sort of, yeah, it wasn't the best of things, but actually it came out of it and you've got a successful country, essentially. And it's up to any success or detriments they've got now. It's completely up to them. And it's been what, where was Indians independence? 1948 or was it in the, I can't remember the official date, but I think 48 is the one that it sticks in my head. So they've had what? See, that's 80 years. So it's 80. It's less than 100 years, and you look at they've got space programs. They're doing all the stuff there.
I think it was 47. Aiden, that was yeah.
40s, yeah. So they're big moves, but obviously, as we said, with Latin America, they never really had that sort of right. Cool. We've realised we fucked up, so therefore we're going to try and make these good bits stay, and then we'll sort out all the crap bits later on, sort them out and not sort them out. The British Empire famous for having the Commonwealth afterwards, going, cool, yeah, we messed up, we'll sort this out. Everyone join the Commonwealth, and then we'll sort of shift things around later on to just sort of even things out and see where we messed up. We can fix it later, but we've got you set up. Latin America never had that. It's like it wasn't a thing. The Spanish Empire collapsed, and then what do you think with the Spain in the 20s and 30s? It's the reason that Spain wasn't involved in World War II. There wasn't much of Spain left to be part of World War II. Like if they'd have joined the Axis because they were a fascist state, and then we'd have just invaded them and completely destroyed them in about 3 weeks. They'd have just collapsed because they've just been through a massive civil war, which actually had a lot of help. It's another Italy-Spain thing. There was a lot of Italian involvement in that, even after the end of the Civil War as well. And this is what you were saying about, and this is the Latin Americans. It's that Latin thing, as you're saying about. This is where the Roman thing comes from. You've got all of this stuff from the Roman Empire, and then you can just go, well, the ethos of these two states. You think fascism in Italy was all about harkening back to the Roman Empire,
right?
And they were supporting the Spanish fascists as well that were doing the same. So any connection that the Latin American countries had to Europe was supported by this a lot of fascist ideology that was really based on Rome being great and how Rome could be great and we could create this. And obviously these days we realise that that kind of works for a certain amount of time. Like Cuba is a nice example that went completely the other direction with communism, and it kind of worked. Everyone was fine, and then it sort of started to get behind. And when people started realising that, yeah, communism's great on paper, they actually did a really good job of communism, but it's still they've had to go on to if you're surrounded by capitalist countries, you can't be communist surrounded by capitalist countries.
Yes,
like, it doesn't work like that, unfortunately. If they're surrounded by communist countries, they'd have probably done really well, but they weren't. So it's Cuba's main income now is tourism. I believe that they're, because it's a big thing from the UK to go to Cuba these days. And they've got Revolution to Cuba as a bar chain, Latin American food, drinks, music, and stuff like that as an experience, as it were, to people over here in the UK as well. So it's when you get countries that are relying on tourism, you know that everything else has kind of collapsed if that's their main income source.
Yeah,
it's tourism, but it's like, well, our country's pretty, at least. Come and look at the pretty things and give us money for that.
That's the same thing here in Puerto Rico. We got a beautiful island, but everything else is kind of stuck, surrounded by corruption. And I'm gonna get into the next thing that's hurting Latin America: nepotism. Nepotism. Yeah. That is huge in Latin America. Huge. And this is one thing I can say about America. Even though America's got its issues, nepotism isn't one of them. Nepotism is a ridiculously bad problem in Latin America. The families, because especially here in Puerto Rico, the government, the dirty little secret about the island is government's controlled mostly by family. and the reason that's a big problem because going back, what empire was very nepotistic? Spain. Spain was
Yeah.
ruled by nepotism.
Spain and Portugal still have massive issues with it. A lot of the Spanish and
Yes.
Portuguese people that I talked to, I worked with someone from Portugal, and she's like, there's the reason that a lot of them come out of Portugal to the UK and stuff like that. Yeah, we've got our problems. Yeah, we do have problems with nepotism, but in Portugal, it'd be you've got all of the qualifications and experience to do this job 10 times over, yet you lose the job to the local councillor's second cousin.
Yes, right. The third cousin sometimes. I mean, one time a person got a job here who was third cousin, and I said, "Wow, really? We are really that screwed up that we're giving jobs to third cousins that have basically no connection to the family, but because you got that little connection, you're gonna get the job."
You know what you need to do? You need to get in on your family tree. You need to work out some connections in there, see if you can get yourself a fancy job.
but the thing is that, I was discussing this with a friend of mine. She's Mexican. Her parents are from Mexico, and she says she loves Mexico, but the reason she wouldn't go to Mexico because of the nepotism. It's very nepotistic in Mexico. And this is the actual Mexican telling me this. This is not just me saying I'm my ass, as you say in the UK. This is actually what Mexicans are going through because the government out there is very nepotistic, and they got that from Spain. And one more thing I will add to Aiden is Spain and Portugal are some of the most conservative countries in Europe. People might say Europe is very progressive, and while that's true for the most part, except Spain. Spain is actually very still stuck on very conservative traditional values. Where the male, like you and me, we still have a lot more power than females in Spain.
There's something very interesting when you look at it with Europe. Obviously, a lot of these values that are ascribed to Europe often come from. It's actually and this goes back to what you're saying about the Roman values side of thing. Is they come from Northern Europe, are these places that when people imagine, oh, this thing, you're talking your Denmark, your Netherlands, it's like your Scandinavian countries into that northern bit, the UK for a lot of that. And when you look at those countries, it's just slap a map of Germanic tribes over the top of it. Once they weren't conquered, it's that ethos from the Germanic tribes, that independent ethos. And it's one of those big things in the US, that real strong streak of independent values, which has some detrimental effects in the US. Don't get me wrong, it's
right.
Sunshine and Roses, but a lot of that comes from it's the whole white Anglo-Saxon Protestant. That is your Germanic peoples.
Celtics.
As soon as you get that group of people doing that. Whereas if you go down to Spain, so Brexit, for example, one of the big things about Brexit is it was about funding into the EU. That when you get a group of people together, the richer country is obviously going to put more in, and they're going to get less out. That's how it works. Obviously, Brexit didn't really think about that properly, considering with the UK. So the poorer countries included Wales, which had a lot of EU funding. And even some of our counties, you go down to Cornwall and Devon, that sort of area as well. They got a lot of EU funding. Ironically, the Independence Party, the UK Independence Party that started the whole Brexit thing, was actually from that area of the world. And God knows why they started it, because they had a lot of funding there. And their main income in that area of the world, because farming's taken a big hit, is tourism. They have a massive issue. And same with the large swathes of Wales. They have a massive issue with people from, say, the London area up to sort of where we are, this sort of southeastern bubble of the UK, which has got it's like I've talked about before, where if you work in London, they literally you get what's called London waiting. They pay you more because you're living in London because it's so expensive. But that means you've got more money. So as soon as you go to somewhere like Wales or you go down into Cornwall as well, house prices are starting to normalise, but you'd be buying a second home because it's cheaper than renting a holiday home. you'd buy a home and then you'd rent it out to get that. And they've got towns that are literally shut down. There's when I went to Greece, I went to Kos. Kos town is a town, so even when it's non-tourist times, it's still a working town. Obviously, the hotels have less people going in and things like that, but it's still generally a place. If you go to the north of the island of Kos, you've got Kadamina. Kadamina, we went and visited on the off season because there was a couple of bits up there we were visiting, and literally the town was shut down. It was a seasonal town. It was only there because of tourists in the height of summer that people go there. So you have this big problem in these areas. This was one of the things with Brexit. Spain was very similar to this. So we were funding a lot of the Spanish farms were absolutely fucked, completely. And this is the Great Recession hit Spain really, really badly. So they're being bailed out. So the UK was like, well, we don't want to fund them being bailed out because it was always bailing out Spain. It was always bailing out.
Right.
But at the same time, it was when you retired, obviously, we call the people that leave our country expats. They're not immigrants, they're British. They're clearly expats. We could never be an immigrant, which I think is the most hilariously stupid situation. However, there's a big problem now since Brexit of Spain turning around to these people and going, go home then. You don't want to be here. You didn't want to be part of the EU, and the big reason was us. Go home. We're just taking everything away from you. You piss off. And there's so many people like trying to get back into the UK and realizing the UK is so much more expensive because they've been living a high life because Spain's economy has been so deflated and fluctuating. It's relying on giving bonuses to these people that are coming in with the money and putting it there. But you live there for long enough. Like my dad lives in Thailand. He's been in Thailand now for what? 20 years. He couldn't move back to the UK. If he moved back to the UK, because he's been out of the UK so long, he wouldn't be eligible for the benefit system as well. You can't just move abroad and come back and then rely on that. You haven't been paying into the system, so you don't get anything out of the system. It's one of the bits I kind of agree with. They've kind of got right with our system that, cool, you've got to kickstart in that. You need to dump some money into it and then you can come in. There are other issues with that, obviously, but he's been there for 20 years. He's not living the high life so much because there's certain things and certain stuff going on in Thailand, but he can live quite happily on what money he gets, and he can't do that. Whereas Spain's like that in Europe as a place that you can go to. Obviously, since Brexit for the UK, that's a bigger issue. But because of that right wing, as you say, that right wing, very sort of authoritarian bent that you get in these areas, you get this weird thing of they try and move forward, and then nepotism will come up. Or well, it was the Basque region. Did you follow the voting for independence of some of those areas? It was kind of like a Brexit type vote. The Spanish government literally sent soldiers in that were beating people up trying to vote. It's like, this is goddamn Europe. This isn't some like really poor country in the arse end of nowhere.
I know.
It's Europe, and you've got a country that is supposed to be one of the lead by example countries that's supposed to be that high up on one of the main countries of Europe, doing that kind of shit at polling stations, seeing people dragged out of polling stations by armed police and beaten shitless with blood running down their face. Like, that's not something you expect. However, if you saw that coming from Latin America, you go, oh, they're at it again. Is this a thing that's happened again? With, as we were saying about with the elections earlier, that you see that in Latin American countries, you'd be like, it's awful, but it's kind of not unexpected to happen. It's like you expect you're going to see that.
Right. But the thing is, Aiden, what you said about Spain, guess what? But the thing about it, Latin American countries, they learned that from Spain. Spain is the mastermind. They're the ones who taught them, like the nepotism and the male. And because here in Puerto Rico, we're still living in a very male-dominated society. I'm not going to lie to you. Females here are kind of treated like second-class citizens still, even though we're an American territory. But it's very different from the States. But meaning when I tell you that,
you say that, but the States is going that way itself. But yeah, carry on.
I mean, but yeah, but I mean, but still, like I tell my friends, I mean, you gotta take your chances in the States. Still, over here, than any Latin American country where they're gonna just treat you like a second class citizen if your sex is female. And my father me and my father we were arguing. I mean, not arguing, we were debating because he keeps telling me that Puerto Rico needs to stop doing this nepotism crap. And I tell him it's not as simple as that. And he says why? Because it's ingrained, Aiden. All this behavior is ingrained into the elite society. You know, because don't forget, we were under the rule of Spain for close to 400 years. You know, we were under the rule of Spain, and Spain ruled with an iron fist, and Spain was under the rule of ancient Rome. You know, because don't forget how the Senate was selected. In order to get into the Senate, you had to be born into the patrician family. You know,
exactly. Yeah.
So in other words, Aiden, all this is ingrained. It's ingrained into Latin American society. So we're telling us to get rid of this mindset. It's not going to work because I mean maybe me and other people are going to embrace that, but the people who make the money, the elites, you know, the people who have the power, they're not going to embrace it because it doesn't benefit them because they don't mind ruling with an iron fist because it benefits them.
It's that fine line between cultural change for the good and losing your culture, because all cultures have bad aspects. So one of the things that Sam reminded me of is so in the UK we have a monarchy. I like the monarchy. I'm incredibly left wing. And if I went to the US, I'd probably be considered a communist. But I'm a supporter of our monarchy. I like the way that our country is set up. The monarchy makes sense. Like we've always had that as our institution, but part of that is we went through the whole shit in the 1600s where we cut the head off a monarch, and the entirety of Europe was like, "The hell did you do?" And we were at war with the entirety of Europe, and our country was up until the 1700s. We were that backwater weirdos who killed their king. As well. But what we came out of that with was, yeah, we've got a monarch, but if they step out of line, we're going to do something about it. But at the same time, and this is something that's been eroded too much, I think, in our country because of the system we have, is the monarchs lost a lot of power. But the whole point of that is checks and balances. The monarch should have enough power to turn around and go, yeah, well, I know it sounds a bit weird. Your peasants are being weird, so like you need to deal with that. It's not that is the way that people perceive it, but it isn't that. It's the checks and balances of the monarch's there to go. It's the tyranny of the demos, the Greek political thought idea of the democracy has a fault, and the fault in democracy is when you get a group of people together that are a bunch of idiots and they're going to do stupid things. You need something to check that. In our system, that's supposed to be the monarch who does that. But when you really think about it, I'm left wing, yet I support a monarchy. And the very early definition of left wing was you're anti the monarchy. The monarchy is the right wing. This comes obviously from revolutionary France. And obviously things have changed over time and stuff's mixed up. But we have that sort of dichotomy in our country where we have that type of thing. So that's culturally ingrained. And as you're saying, it's that type of concept culturally ingrained in Latin America. I think a huge part of it is the Catholic Church, with the change of Protestantism in Northern Europe, especially, is there's more emphasis on the individual. Like I said earlier, it has its problems, but it breaks certain parts of the cycle where everyone is important for certain reasons. And while, yes, you still get the sexism inherent within that, it's a lot easier to break through that. But when you're looking at a very stratified system, and with the Catholic Church on top of it, there is that very traditional values system. But that's what makes Latin America Latin America. If you get rid of that, is Latin America still Latin America? if that's a cultural change. But the problem now is the bad parts of that are what is controlling everything.
Right.
As you say, it's the nepotism. It's like it's not the good part of that that's controlling things. It's the bad part of it that's controlling things. Do you get rid of that to fix the problem, or do you try and slowly change it? It's one of those. It's not, as you said, it's not an easy thing. Yes, nepotism has gone too far. You need to get rid of that. A little bit of nepotism, like fine, fair enough. Nepotism happens all over the place, but when it gets to that point, it's talking about a third cousin can get a job over a person, a candidate. You've gone too far with that. But also, as you said,
and not to mention,
you can't
Aiden,
just get rid of it.
And Aiden, not to mention that third cousin could be as dumb as a bag of rocks.
Yeah.
You know, he might not have any qualifications at all. He may be dumber than you and I combined. Have an IQ of 70, but because he's family, and that's where it gets aggravating. You know, now if he's someone that's qualified, okay, you have to live with it. But if he's a guy who's got an IQ of 70, or even know it, dare I say, then yeah, this is how you get all the problems we have.
And the reason that people elect that, it's one of those things when everything gets difficult, people tend to go to the extremes because they're the people that want to shake things up and really change things, and they want to do that. The problem you get is then people go into those extremes, and that's where you get this nepotism come in, right?
Yep, exactly.
This cousin's got these great ideas.
Yeah, you go too far in one. Yeah, exactly. Just like here in Puerto Rico, the situation is: do we become a state or do we become independent? The problem with that is, being a state has its benefits, but it has so many disadvantages. But the thing is, instead of fixing the actual problems, which is the nepotism, the male-dominated society, the corruption, instead of fixing those three things, everybody says, "Oh, we got to be independent." You know, the only way we're gonna be good is if we break away from the United States. Well, it sounds good on paper, but you do realize those three things I just said are going to get even worse because now the United States doesn't intervene no more. Forget it. We're going to be another Honduras, or one of those countries that are really doing bad, like really badly. We're going to be one of those countries.
The US is going that way as well with the.
Yeah, I know.
Donald Trump, putting his unqualified children into positions they should never have been in. You got the whole EPA thing that went on. It's like you've just taken something that was kind of working and then just messed it up for no reason. And there's loads of that happening. So if you join the US, things might change.
Yeah, and then on the other side, you got Donald Trump, and then on the other side, Joe Biden and Hunter Biden with Ukraine, with that scandal.
And
so
even though he's got the qualifications to do a bunch of things, he was in over his head on that. And there's a lot of this is the other problem that the US ends up in is they cloud it in so much propaganda. It's like, well, now you investigating Joe Biden and anything to do with his family to do with that is just political now. It doesn't serve any purpose anymore because you've basically covered it in so much stuff. All that people are going to be banging on about is the stuff that's untrue. It's literally the lies, the propaganda, like the laptop situation. Like, give it up. Like, here are his emails. Give it up. Like, that was done. She did bad. They are all doing it. Every single one of them are doing it. The entire electoral college. If you actually look at eligibility for electoral college, the entire electoral college is ineligible to be part of the electoral college because nepotism and backhanders and corruption, they're all ineligible, but no one party is going to do that because it's going to become a propaganda piece because it will become a witch hunt against the other party, which then makes it about getting the other party, not actually finding the people that are corrupt. And it was one of the big things I saw with it was the whole Bernie Sanders thing way back when, and they're like, there was this whole right-wing thing of like, oh yeah, but this person's corrupt, and they're like, well, if you've got some evidence for that, yeah, we'll go after them as well. And it just completely short-circuited this whole right-wing propaganda thing of like, no, we just want to get rid of the corruption. But then, like, you don't, when people look at things, and Bernie Sanders is an interesting one because he's not a big fan of guns, yet he stood and fought with his position to keep a gun factory open in the territory because it was for the jobs of the people. It's one of those, you have to do things that you're not quite a fan of, but because of the way the system is, that you have to keep that because you're fighting for the people. You're elected to represent these people. This is what the people want. So you may not personally think that that's the best way to go, but he's fighting for the jobs, not for the guns as such. And it then just turned into an entire propaganda piece. And that's a big problem with the US. And I think if Puerto Rico became a full state, you'd end up having those issues on top of the issues.
Right. I guess it's a pick your poison situation. You know, do you want to go in the United States, or do you want these three things: corruption, nepotism, and male domination to be even worse? I'll be honest, Aiden. I'll be honest. I still got to take my chance with the United States because the three problems that we have here they're going to become rampant. It's going to be unlivable. You know, if you're a female here, you might as well get out of here if you become independent. That's the way I feel.
I'm completely with you as well. It's when it came to the Brexit vote, and me and my mate we've never been big fans of being part of Europe. We like it; it has its advantages. There was a big student exchange program, and for my generation especially, there's a lot of advantages taken over that, and the sharing of scientific knowledge and everything was absolutely fantastic. And the travel to Europe and everything. Well, I used to travel to Europe all the time. At least once a year, I'd go to France. And that was school trips. We'd literally get to school early, get on a bus and go to France. And spend a couple of days in France. Like learn French, learn about French culture. You can't really do that stuff anymore.
Right.
So we lost those things. But there were things about Europe where like, we don't like this. We're losing that, like the euro. I wasn't a big. Never wanted us to have the euro because our currency is strong enough, and it is what I was saying about tradition earlier. This dichotomy that I have of being left wing and very into some of these very traditional things. But the same. So me and my mate, the way we looked at it, we had a big old discussion about it. And we're like, well, what we'll see is the status quo now. Brexit breaks that status quo. If someone gives us a damn good reason why we should leave Europe and gives us a bunch of facts and the life is going to be better, but they actually give us a factual reason, we'll vote for it. But our default position is going to be status quo. We'll stay in Europe. And there were a lot of people like that. I mean, people weren't voting to stay in Europe. People were voting for not leaving Europe as well, which is, as you say, it's the situation you've got in Puerto Rico, that you've got things are bad. If you join the US, they're not going to get worse. So you essentially would be voting for the status quo rather than, oh my God, let's have a civil war level of nonsense that would go on, which is a distinct possibility. But if you look at across Latin America, you look at Venezuela was a very big one as well with that.
El Salvador back in the 80s.
Yeah. And one of the interesting things about that, especially Central Latin America, is the CIA, the operation under Nicaragua being a classic example of that.
Mm-hmm.
They're open about it. They're actually destroying parts of that to make them weaker countries, so they didn't have strong countries on their border. So you've got that factor to deal with at the same time. And it's similar to, do we join this empire on our border because things, aren't going to be amazing, but they're not going to get worse?
It's funny it's funny you mentioned that because again, that we're going to go back to ancient times with ancient Rome. You had the Federati, the barbarians, the Federati. They decide, I'm going to join Rome because I don't want to get destroyed by the Roman Empire. So I'm going to join their ranks as a Federati.
It's one of those things that Latin America. There's a strong cultural stuff as well that it's one of the things in the US, especially with like obviously Disney's got its problems, but you think with some of that drawing in of Latin American
Hmm.
culture through some of the shows that they've done is the I forgot what we didn't talk about Bruno. What's that from? That one that brought that to the UK as well. The whole because it's one of the things that people don't realise is the Spain for us isn't like Mexico for the US. And people often assume that Spain is Europe's Mexico, and it's not. It's a completely different situation going on.
Right.
So while there's Spanish culture, it's no different to there being French culture, German culture, British culture, Scandinavian culture, which obviously has its differences in between the different bits of Scandinavia as well. But so you get cultural blocks and then cultural individualities. And where we see Latin America, we see it more like the US sees Europe of, well, we can't distinguish between something that's, say, Mexican and Puerto Rican. We can't do that. And obviously you have the jokes on US sitcoms of the cleaner being Latin American cleaner and they're
Right.
referred to as a Mexican when they're Puerto Rican or vice versa.
Yes.
Those sorts of ideas. But that's a very real thing of the knowledge about those cultural aspects of it as well. And culturally, it's well, a good example and a good baseline to look at it is look at crime films. Who are the criminals in the crime films? And that'll tell you what are the biggest problems in the US at the time. And 90% of the time these days, it's a Latin American gang.
Yeah. Hmm.
So the
Yes.
bad guys, you portrayed as, oh, you the bad guys. You come in, you just bringing guns in, you drug cartels and stuff. The
Yeah.
problem is, there's a lot of truth behind it.
There's
as
truth,
well,
though.
which
I
is
mean,
why
I mean,
yeah,
Aiden.
it's not.
I mean, I might want to get angry. My father might want to get angry, but the problem is, it's true. I mean, the
Yeah,
factor that the reason we have that stereotype because it's true. I'm sorry. I mean, first of all, if you want people to stop stereotyping us, you gotta do the best you can to break that stereotype.
mm,
But like I keep telling you, Aiden, it's ingrained in our culture already, so it's harder than you think. Now, now, I'm gonna give you I'm gonna give you a statement that might blow your mind. All right, in Latin America. All right, ready for this? Why do you think ancient Rome fell? Why do you think the Roman Empire fell? It didn't fall because they didn't have enough military might. It fell because of its internal issues. All right, of
yeah,
the nepotism, the corruption, the bad emperors. Latin America is the modern day ancient Rome. That period. It's got the same it's got the same culture. It's got the same architecture type. It's got the same society. It Latin America is ancient Rome today. In today's world, we are ancient Rome. We are the Romans.
look at the early Byzantines,
Yep.
the Balkan area. They had massive issues, and they just had to accept that the foreign powers were coming in, and they were going to control certain aspects of their society, and do what is the ancient equivalent of gun running. The cultural things that they were doing that weren't part of their culture, and they were pushing it. Which is the CIA
Uh-huh.
in that as well. So you've got all of these aspects. There's so many parallels in there, especially with the parallels of the US and the Roman Empire as well. More the Roman Republic. Actually, the late stages of the Roman Republic. That there are huge differences, but there are so many similarities of this late republic. You've got the big families where the power is switching between these big families. You've got the money and they're the movers and shakers and they do things. And the people on their border are trying to get involved, but they're coming in and doing stuff. But they're too busy fighting amongst themselves to deal with that as well. But the weird thing is,
Mhm.
obviously, as you say, Latin America is like a Roman Empire next to a Roman Empire. They're both doing everything to each other. It's as I've said before on this podcast when we talk about the Falklands, is the Falklands only really comes up in when you talk about Argentina when Argentina has just basically just shut itself economically, and the person in charge has gone, isn't our military great? Let's go and kill some British people, because that's the thing they've done before. And warfare always pulls a nation together. It'll either break a nation or it'll pull them together. It's only two things it does, but most of the time it pulls them together, even if they think the war is wrong. Look at Russia and Ukraine. There are plenty of people in Russia that do not want to be in your war in Ukraine, but there's nothing they can do about it. They go to the front lines and everything. They have that issue, but part of the war in Ukraine is to pull Russia together because of economic problems. Exactly the same thing happens in Latin America constantly with those ideas. We still have that weird aberration in the middle of Latin America, which is the Welsh colony, because the Welsh, one of the few parts of the UK, the Scottish, the only reason the Scottish are actually part of the UK is because they tried to do colonialism and kind of fucked it up. And they ran out of money because of failed colonies, and we had money but no monarch, and they had a monarch and no money. So we were like, do you want to sort of join us together? Hence James I and Six of Scotland. And that's where that whole situation came about. So you end up with this weird situation where these countries come together because they've both got a similar problem that can solve it for each other, but it can't solve it properly at the same time, because you've got say Brazil. All right, let's take Brazil as an example. Obviously,
right.
Stop this getting convoluted. So Brazil is an up-and-coming nation. Is obviously with the modification of the first, second, third world thing, because that was originally just who was aligned with NATO and who was aligned with Russia. It's not that anymore. But it's now economics that we use it. So Brazil would be second world coming into first world. It's sort of proto first world economy. You've got the destruction of the rainforests as well, which is a big issue. But that is because they're working with the US, and it's the production of meat, because they can have their big cattle farms. And what everyone forgets is the whole idea of the cowboy comes from the idea of the gaucho. That's a Latin American concept that came through, and it's because people often forget that Texas is Latin America. Like New Mexico, the clue's in the goddamn name. It's like that whole area of the southern US has that massive influence of Latin American culture that comes in, and those aspects, everything down to cowboys, are a Latin American concept. If you go right the way back, even like we go like all the way back to the early formations of groups of people, Peru, massive example with the valleys, the valley system, and how the cultures became together with the valley system. There, no one really talks about Peru. They've sort of just been a place that's just done what it does.
Yeah, Peru. Sort of well, yeah, everybody.
Well.
Yeah, I mean, everybody connects Peru to the Incas, the Incan Empire. Yeah. So that's what Peru is.
That's all people really know it for. But it
just
takes long. It does its thing as well. But I do think there's a certain amount to be said for where we'd see a country as, oh, it's a poor country, how much, but realistically, are the people happy? Is it just ticking along, doing its own thing? Yes, everyone's going to have corruption. Yes, everyone's going to have nepotism. Yes, everyone's going to have its issues. That's okay. But realistically, Peru, as far as I know, you never see anything about it. It's just kind of there. It does its own thing. That, I think, is kind of a model that the rest of Latin America could really use do that. Like
I know Argentina used to be that model too until the economy tanked there.
Yeah, the military dictatorship, it kind of that kind of ruined it, because Argentina was doing really super well. But again, this goes back to what I said right at the beginning. They were basically allied with the Nazis. Second World War didn't get that boost after the Second World War.
I mean, we're running short of time right now. We're getting close to the hour, but I gotta tell you, this has been a really, really fun topic. I know it's controversial. Yes, it hits hard because I'm Latin American, but this is a conversation we gotta have. For me, this is a conversation we needed to have, because it's just so much truth to it. I mean, it does it sting? Yeah, it stings, but like I mean, it stings that I gotta tell you that we are the modern day ancient Rome. But I'm not talking about the Roman Republic. I'm talking about the late Roman Empire, which unfortunately fell on his ass. So,
question to
yeah,
finish this up.
yeah.
How would you fix it? What would your go-to idea be to fix it? I'm not like an idea that would just fix everything, obviously, but what idea would you implement to see if that worked to try and push everything in the right direction?
I mean, the problem is, Aiden, it all starts with education. You have to have a better education system to raise the next level of the future generation of leaders. Really, I think the biggest thing though is you gotta fight nepotism. You gotta. It's a very archaic, a very archaic system. It has to go. You gotta get rid of nepotism. As long as you don't get rid of nepotism, what? Latin America's never gonna get out of his own way. That's the big thing. Get rid of nepotism. Or at least make it hard. Make connections more fair. I mean, that's that. You have and don't make it real like a third. Don't make it real a third cousin could get a job, a political job. You have to be within the family itself. No third, second cousins or anything done like that. And if you're gonna keep it that way, Aiden, you gotta make sure they're qualified. You gotta put a system where it's checks and balances. Check they got the quantification. Don't just put any idiot behind there because it's family, because you want to keep it within the family. That really, Nathan, to summarize it, nepotism has to go. You got to get rid of nepotism. As long as nepotism is a thing, we're going to continue to fail. But I mean, I know some people say Africa is just as bad, but I mean, there's some parts of Africa they're not doing too bad. Nigeria is getting up there. South Africa is not too bad, although I know they're going a bit of a recession.
It's got a few issues. Like Nigeria as well, but every country's got its issues. Like,
and Morocco, I think Morocco is actually a really good country in Africa. Morocco.
Okay, yeah, it's partly with the tourism. It's so close to Europe as well. It's easy to get.
Yeah, but I'm just trying to say, Aiden, there are countries doing better than us. They're not, and it's not America. We could do better. It's nepotism is the biggest thing holding us back. Corruption, that's going to be hard to fix because, I mean, because I know in the UK there's corruption too in the United Kingdom. I'm sure.
Yeah, just a little bit. Yeah,
that's going to be. Unfortunately, getting rid of corruption is not. The most realistic thing is nepotism's got to go. That's probably the most realistic way to get Latin America back on this track.
Really unfortunate moment. I will be back in a second.
Okay.
Really unfortunate moment to have to run off. I will be right back.
All right. So yeah, guys, I hope you've been enjoying this feisty, not debate, but feisty conversation about a very important topic that hits me hard. And so, Mike, I was going to tell Aiden, the biggest thing to Latin America to get out of his ass and to start going the right direction is, you have to get rid of the old Spanish ways of running your country. Spain doesn't win your country, you do. You have to stop relying on old Spanish methods like nepotism and all this. And this isn't ancient Rome where you have to be born to a rich family just to get a chance. It should be like America, where you can be a Barack Obama from Hawaii and win the presidency and run the country. You should be able to, come from a normal family. It shouldn't be that you're born with a silver spoon, born from the elites, like Julius Caesar. But I think it might take a Julius Caesar kind of person. Like Julius Caesar fought for the people, even though he was born into a rich family. He fought for the people.
Hey, and they don't necessarily have to be that good. They just have to be better.
Yes.
It's like that first step on the rung of they're not related to the people in charge. They're trying to do stuff better. Did they get something done? Good. Something was done.
Right.
And then the next person can come in and do something. And then the next person then has a platform to be able to do more.
Yeah. Unfortunately, in my opinion, Aiden, I think that will eventually happen. But I don't think me and you're going to be around to see that.
You're not planning to live forever, are you? I've got plans. I'm making friends with scientists to live forever.
I mean, if you can find a fountain of youth, yeah, I might know about that. Yeah. But anyway, folks, I think that's the end of the show. I mean, we were well over the hour by 6 minutes, but this was a really good conversation. Very interesting that we were able to bring back Rome into the conversation because it does play a big part. But man, it's a really good conversation. So good that I don't even know what we're going to talk about next time. We're going to have to come up with a topic for the next show.
I've got a whole bunch of ideas we're going to have to decide between.
So
I've got from this show specifically.
Yeah. Anyway, Aiden, what have you been up to lately before we end the show?
So obviously last weekend running a World War II airsoft event. It went well. The hottest weekend in the UK so far, and people were wearing wool uniforms as well. So shout out to all those people that kept them on the whole weekend. I was wearing shirt sleeves. Apart from that, yeah, it's one of the big things that I do now is airsoft events, sort of almost LARP level stuff. And there's nowhere that you can go and really see that unless you live relatively local type of thing. However, obviously, I have plans tomorrow that I have some spare time to write shock horror. I will be sitting in front of my keyboard and actually putting fingers to letters.
Awesome.
So, rather than actually tell people to go and look at my stuff, just wish me luck to actually get some words down.
And we shall do that. I'm just working on my new book, Frogs and Margaritas 2. I'm writing that right now. And I'm planning to release Frogs and Margaritas either late June, early July. That's really about it. I mean, just busy on the keyboard, getting those words down. But anyway, guys, that's gonna be it for the Age of Warfare podcast. This has been Sartorial Natchez Maximus. That has been the Gate, Aiden Cordier, and we shall see you next time on the podcast. Until then, take care, guys.
Take care.